to be on the town board on this side, right? Is that how it works?
Not just wearing a pen, is that
Oh,
all?
that's,
Good afternoon, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the inaugural meeting of the, we haven't actually said exactly what we want to be called, but for the moment, we'll call it an oversight committee to assist the comprehensive plan development by the planner, Kurt Lavala. And this committee is constituted of 2 members of the village board and 2 members of the town board. I'm the chair, Tom Rocco. Ariana Bosco is the other member of the village board. Dan Torres is here representing the town board. Jeff Logan is coming, but he will be late. And the main what's the right word?
ringleader?
It's not the
Facilitator?
ringleader.
Master of ceremony?
He's he's not just a facilitator,
Moderator.
not just a moderator.
Planner.
No. He's the planner. I was thinking of a word like protagonist.
Oh, okay.
Since this is
Hopefully this is not gonna be an epic struggle.
not an epic struggle, but a brief development of a comprehensive plan for both the village and the town of New Paltz. This is, I understand, not the very first time this has been done. I believe it was done
64.
in '64, but since '94, '95, the town and village have been operating with their own plans, each of which is now significantly out of date. There have been interim reviews of those plans with suggestions to each of the boards to redo their respective comprehensive plans. There was indeed for the town a very significant and costly effort to develop a draft comprehensive plan. Within the past couple of years, the town was dissatisfied with that effort, and it has not been adopted, or it has not even been folded into a new effort. There were 2 relatively recent efforts by citizen committees to comment on the village's comprehensive plan. One was chaired by Ruth Elwell, and she submitted a substantial number of documents with a great deal of citizen input. The second was chaired by me. And I also submitted several documents.
17 recommendations.
19.
19.
We submitted 3 different documents in order to be clear that they could be selected individually. The first document was what we believe to be the top 3 objectives of any new comprehensive plan. The second was the top 10.
Did we meet the top 3, one of the top 3 with the B3 zoning, or was that just
No,
one of the 19?
No, that's one of the 19. It might even be one of the top 10.
Okay.
And then we had thought for the sake of harmony that we would then make it 20, but it turned out that we had 19. And we said, we'll go with 19. We don't have to make it 20. So we presented a third document that laid out what we thought should be the top 19 recommendations or top 19 objectives in a new comprehensive plan. Those documents are all available. They are all available, I believe, still to anyone who wants to go on to Google Groups and find the Village of New Paltz Comprehensive Plan Task Force. And I was threatened several times, by the way, by Google Groups with a potential significant change in their structure that might not continue to permit that access, but I believe, were you not able to access that information?
Actually, I was, although when I tried to use the link, I wasn't, I'm not sure if it was me or if it was the site. But I did have those two documents, the final report and the recommendations by the master plan task.
And if anyone wants them, I will obviously be able to make them available to you in print
Were the
format.
in '06, I remember, I guess just before or just after your group, we were about to hire Behan Planning to do this, and they had come up with a proposal that had some kind of outline. Did you have a copy of that,
I
Craig?
do have.
I thought it might be helpful just for structural purposes,
It's very
if
helpful.
nothing else. Yeah.
Yes, their familiarity with the village and town is good, as well as their work, yeah.
Apologize for being late.
I'm on the town board now. You can go.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's okay.
All right.
That didn't take long at all.
You have to be mayor though.
This, for those of you who may be watching, this is Jeff Logan, the second member of the town board, who constitutes then the town board's membership on this committee. I'd like to make only one more kind of a housekeeping remark. And that is that the boards, both boards, meeting jointly, also authorized a member of the college community to be on this committee. We were not as quick in our communication with the college as we might have been. The college has now been notified of the existence of this committee, and it has been sent, that is the president's office, has been notified, and has been sent the minutes of the meeting to explain what we hope will be college participation in the oversight of the planning process.
Minutes of what meeting?
Of the meeting, the joint meeting
Oh, okay, okay,
that authorized the formation of this committee in the first place.
right.
So, that's the, all of the housekeeping stuff. We need to set our own objectives. I'm gonna make some suggestions about our objectives for this meeting, but we need to set our objectives. I do not feel that as chair, it's my role to determine the agenda. It's my role to help facilitate the accomplishment of the agenda. But the agenda is always the agenda of the body meeting. So I am going to suggest that we determine 3 objectives at least for the immediate attention of the planner, so that on his next meeting, he can report on very specific areas of progress, and that we establish a schedule of meetings for the relatively near future at least. So if we schedule 2 or 3 meetings for the near future, we'll know what we're about and when we can expect to get reports back from the planner. Are there other objectives that we should have for this meeting? Are you doing minutes, or are you just doing this for your own sake?
I'm kind of doing minutes. I wrote who was present.
They're not
and I
mutually
think-
exclusive. As long as your minutes get sent to everyone else, that's all that matters,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah, I was planning on sharing these notes.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I take them
So-
anyways, so I may as well.
Next, what else do you want to accomplish
For this meeting,
in this inaugural meeting?
in this Nova meeting, I really do not have any other.
You want to go outside and play.
No, no, I'm good right now. I'm good right now. No, I want to get a master plan written. So no, I'm actually really good.
No, I think we have a good agenda just for our first meeting. We'll see where it takes us.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, and I think maybe from conversation, we would be able to, if there's anything else, figure out a solid agenda for a future meeting.
Okay, Kurt?
The only new thought I have is regarding the community value survey. At first, it seemed that prior town and village plan had drawn upon the previous data and analysis of community responses, which, as we might expect, exceeded those in other communities. At the same time, I think looking at the data that was used for the 2009 town draft, as well as the village master plan task force efforts in about 2010, I think it probably is important that I produce a survey for circulation. There were a couple of caveats and that were with regard to town and village, as saying that it may not quite be as statistically scientific as we wanted it, or that the distribution of this community value survey was not perhaps as widespread or as to all corners of the communities.
You know,
Well,
thank you for being so politically correct in your answer there. I thought the distribution of it was pretty adequate, and I thought that the response rate was incredible. I found myself and Kitty. Do you remember that when we were going through that? Myself and Kitty were the only two that objected. The questions were all incredibly misleading and led you to a very distinct conclusion. So
There were a
problem-
few minor tweaks.
the
occurred.
town one I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
the town.
The village one. I think there
apologize,
there
not the
was
village
some
one.
concern at one point about it being going out in the water bills, which only went to property owners, and
Correct.
then a follow up went out to renters, or at least rental addresses.
Yes.
And I think there was some question about what a statistically significant return rate would be, and whether that was met. I'm correct me if I'm hazy. Is that all? Just as roadblock, as things that there might be roadblocks again in the future.
town, we used I believe we used the tax rolls. I'm speaking from memory, and the biggest problem and the response rate was a couple percentage points, which is way north of where I know they normally are. It was actually a really good response rate. But the questions are what I had a problem with. I don't know if you went and looked them up. I didn't bring that with me, that file.
Yeah.
But the questions I did not find satisfactory. They were looking for the answer
Right.
in the question, and
Who developed the questions?
unfortunately, a company based out of
The planner.
yes,
out of Buffalo.
Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And it's have you read that one, Dan?
I don't think they have a copy of that.
Oh, I will get you a
Yeah,
copy
I'd
of
love
it.
to have a copy.
There's
Yeah.
also Carol was kind enough to give me an electronic DVD.
You know what? I actually have an extra disc, Dan. I will
Okay,
give you.
that'd
I will
be
give you the
great, yeah.
disc, and
I have it in my office, but I can't get in there.
there's a good feeling. There's a lot of boilerplate stuff in there that just doesn't fit our community. One of the suggestions is to dissolve the village, for example. I thought
We got a
Jason-
whole other committee working on that one.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though. That was one of their things, was that first dissolve the village, and then and it's actually in there. I forgot what page. I could find it for you. It was interesting, but so I'm glad you picked up on that and you said it much nicer than I would have. But yeah, I think one of our big tasks is, as joint board though, is going to be working on the questions, and I would look for you to help guide us on that.
Yes, in fact, I owe you actually already by this time, but if I may,
I want to make a gloss, which I hope will be only a moment. The survey that was done that Jason has alluded to was indeed sent out initially with the water bills, and therefore it was nowhere near a statistically significant sample.
Not when 75% of the village are
75% of the
renters.
village. So we did then have an opportunity to distribute several hundred of them, but not thousands, to a couple of different apartment complexes. So that was not also chosen with, it was chosen out of convenience. We supplemented that with a survey handed out to business owners by the downtown DBA, the Business Association.
Uh-huh.
And then, because we had no input from the college, we requested assistance from the vice president for administration. And he got us several, I think 110 additional. So we wound up with somewhere between 350 and 400 responses. None of that would make this statistically significant,
Well, why would that not be?
because there was no sampling mechanism that we used. We
Okay.
did everything off the cuff.
All right.
So we
I
could
took
get
that.
at the business guys, so we gave them.
No, I took
We got it.
Lee Maringoff's Mayor's Poll class, so I know a little bit
Mhm.
about
So none of this. But we were quite pleased that we wound up at the end with some input from each of those constituencies in the village. We had no professional assistance in wording the sample questions, however. So it was also the case that this was done by a layman's group looking to get input. So that's the status of that.
Hey, Tom, the master plan community, whatever we call the task force from '05 to '06, which
So
was,
Ruth Elwell's group.
it was chaired by Jeremy, whose last name I can't remember. He's left New Paltz since then, but yeah, the one that Ruth was on.
So
yeah.
has Ruth.
Yeah, oh, that's true. Is that something that is useful for Kurt now, or is that something that's so far, like, that was encompassed by your group, or is no longer relevant?
I believe that I gave Kurt the disc that Ruth gave me
Yes,
that has the content
Okay.
of those reports.
So you have that, and you'll be able to judge whether it's totally valid or useful.
yeah,
So, okay.
thank you. In fact, just following up on Jeff's question a minute ago, I'd like to, by April 11th, submit to this committee a draft of a series of questions, and certainly something that we can work off of, and by the end of our next meeting, solidify. My aim is going to be trying to say more with less and not exhaust our respondents. I mean, that's gonna be my goal, but I don't wanna leave whole topics out. But I do think there's, when folks get it, they're probably gonna look at it and say, do I have time to answer this well and think about the questions?
And just a suggestion too, if we're gonna go down this route of trying to engage the community this way, we have a professional statistician within our community. KT Tobin worked for the
I
Mayor's
was
Poll for
thinking about
years
this.
and
I was thinking
created a
about
number
Korea.
of those polls.
Yeah.
And if the committee would like, as this process moves along, I could contact her to see if she would be willing to assist us to create a more scientific survey.
She
Yeah.
worked with me and with my committee after the fact, trying to pull the data points together in a way that would have as much validity as they could have. She was frustrated in that effort, not because the individual pieces weren't all relevant or clear, but because there was no way to take the input from the DBA and then put that together with what came from. There was no way to pull it all together in a statistically satisfying way. So we wound up without a result, but she was more than willing to help.
Okay.
She put in a considerable amount of time with an intern at the end of this process to try to make it work.
Yeah, I was thinking we could use, the sociology department does this.
Yeah.
They do like a cross-course study.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a whole course in, surveying and statistical analysis, and they're separate courses. And I'm not saying, I know that we can't wait till the semester begins to do it, but maybe there's somebody who can help us before this semester ends. It doesn't have to be a whole class project. There could be a group of people, and maybe KT or Brian O'Back can be people who will help
I mean,
us.
Kurt, did you
Make
have,
connections.
did you have some like,
I'm happy to help.
did you have some like overlying topics though that you wanted to address them to?
Do I have?
Yeah.
Yes, well, yes, there
And you
were-
can give them to us from 20,000 feet, and then that can give us all something to discuss.
Yes, well, I certainly have thoughts on that. Of course, again, the planner is not supposed to tell the community what they want. It's a facilitation. I'm going to try to reread the suggestions I have and make sure that they don't diverge from the purpose of it. However, you know what, a lot of the things that I might focus on are things that were focused on not just in the last community survey and for both town and village, but even in previous ones, where again, the responses were rather consistent on, for example, are you satisfied with pedestrian and bicycle safety and overwhelmingly, the answer was no. You could strongly agree, no opinion, disagree, and strongly disagree. So there, here, although time has passed, we know that we haven't transformed our streetscapes to address that. So that's something that I've never forgotten about. Another one is perhaps parking. That's always a topic of conversation, and it remains so. And beyond that, there certainly are other things too. Those are two that come to mind.
I would suggest that at the end of the survey that my committee did, we left an open question for respondents to tell us what each respondent believed to be the single most important objective for a new comprehensive plan.
That could be a lot of fun.
And so there are approximately, let's say, since not every single person answered, I'm gonna guess that there are about 300 indications of a not statistical, but individual or anecdotal response to this.
Sure.
You could accumulate a lot of information just by going down and ticking off what each person said. And that's available also in the information that you have. I wanna stop for just a moment and ask, is this satisfactory to us as one of the objectives for this meeting? Do we want this task that Kurt will come back to us by
The 11th.
the 11th with a set of questions that could form the basis of a community survey? Is that an objective that we want for this meeting?
Yeah, I would say yes, because let's start out with community input. I mean,
Okay.
That's kind of my feeling. I could be totally wrong, and Kurt could teach me to something different.
Well,
Well, now that's,
Have fun, everybody. Sorry, I'm at the wrong meeting.
okay.
I'm gonna keep talking if I stay, so I should probably
What do you think, Dave?
No, I think it's a great objective to start off and get the ball rolling. Absolutely.
What do you think?
I love this idea.
Okay, all right. Is there any input from the audience? I should have mentioned that we
And I think-
have.
If you really want some.
Well, we do, because Ken, you were around, I
Well,
think,
Ken
at the
is a
start.
planner,
And so Mike,
And you were,
and you're both planners.
and you were at the start of the town one, I think, still?
Yes, well, I was not only involved in consultant interviews,
Okay, yeah, I can't, I knew you were around for part of it.
but, you know, I could offer some thoughts. if
We
you
would-
like them.
We would
Come
love
and
them.
tell us.
It's your introduction music.
That's what I was figuring. Watch out.
And Ken, thank you for those thoughts, and we'll see you again next meeting. It's well appreciated. It's incredible what we got done.
I would like to call attention to the fact that we have only a 2-cycle alarm. It's over very quickly and easily, and it doesn't interfere very much with our activities. But I would also like to say that we have in attendance with us County Legislator Ken Wishnick and Fran Wishnick, each of whom is a planner. And Ken is volunteering to give us input about the initial activities of our comprehensive planning process.
Well, what I'd like to do is just give you some thoughts and see if it relates to what you'd like to do or not. In regard to doing any project in planning, there's an awful lot of history of plans being done and then just sitting on a shelf when they're done, and going through a formulatory approach without concern at each step of the way as to how that particular task will lead towards something that's a useful product in the end. And so with that as a backdrop, what I'd like to suggest is that if you're going to do a survey, think about how that survey would be useful after it's completed in helping you to formulate something that will actually be concrete in a plan and give you some direction. If we ask the most basic questions, do you want your taxes lowered? Do you want more bikeways? Do you want sidewalks? All those kinds of things. We know what the answers are going to be. There's nothing that's unpredictable there. But suppose the survey was approached a little bit differently. You wanted to test some specific ideas, like staying on the same subject. Would you be willing to pay additional property taxes to have additional sidewalks or bikeways in the community? Then you'll be gauging more of a realistic kind of commitment to what that particular objective is. Another thing that could be done is to maybe, without identifying, who fills out what kind of questionnaire, you could kind of do a survey amongst the elected officials on different controversial topics, consolidate them so it's not tagged back to how did any one person vote, see what the consensus feels like, and see if you want to test that and see if the community feels the same way and how it might translate into action. In other words, if you could first, before the survey's formulated and distributed, try to come up with a couple of actual projects or ideas or directions, and then go back to the community to see is there support for it, then you can have some, in my opinion, a better guidance as to how that might progress. And one other thing I wanted to just suggest for thinking, New Paltz is in a very, very unique situation to take advantage of the high viewership of Channel 23. That provides an opportunity to maybe do an interview on each of the questions you want to ask. What are the two sides of the issue? And have it tied directly into the questionnaire, and suggest possibly that people host meetings in their home, or you have a few meetings at different locations, to view the videos and then decide how you want to vote on it, so people don't have to make assumptions as to what you actually mean if the meaning of that is hidden. What comes to mind immediately is something like that was done in Brunswick, Maine several years ago, and they called it the Brunswick Stew Community Dinners, where they had covered dish kinds of gatherings, invited neighbors, and it became a really big social event to just review the issues of the day and have everyone fill out the questionnaires. And so, since you're at that stage now, I just wanted to share those kinds of thoughts and see if any of it would potentially stick with you.
Yeah, Ken, thank you. Actually, you hit on a couple of things. First of all, the business of what every planner must want to do at the outset is have a plan that results in great interest and implementation, not something that might be somewhat forgotten.
Well, wallpaper.
Yeah.
We don't need any more wallpaper.
So that's very important, and of course it starts with things such as the survey. And as far as honesty and forthrightness, such as, I think you suggested, are you willing to pay additional taxes? Obviously, I'd hate to have the results skewed by the answer if we were able to put together a consolidated funding application with the state of New York that resulted in vast funding, because our demographics allow for us to even obtain potentially more funds than some other communities. So I'd be a little bit concerned about that, but you're right about forthrightness.
But there's a way,
Well, I think,
just get the pieces together in a way that isn't just a broad statement. There are lots of things I would like, but if you ask me if I'm willing to pay for it, that gives a
Right.
different answer.
well, I think we can get support for an item, like, say we want, say sidewalk. We could get support for it, and we could say, if there were sidewalks on, all 13 miles of street in the village, it would cost X. are you willing to pay X to have, like, just example, where we
Well,
can
pick
get
one street,
general
Harry
support.
W. Du Bois.
Right, exactly.
A lot of kids walking on that street.
We can get support for the idea generally, and then also get support for a price that would go along with, we could even talk about footage, square footage, or how much.
Price per foot.
Yeah.
And I suppose we might even be able to put in a proper question about, would you support it more if it was partially or mostly or largely funded by grant
Right.
funds? I suppose
Yeah.
that there's.
I would
certainly-
suggest that what Ken is suggesting is not now the formula that you would use, but
Right.
an idea that would inform the development of the questions. Let's make them real and give weight to the real factors rather than just the, I shouldn't say just, because that always is weighted, isn't it? To give weight to important factors other than the way we see it now as we formulate the question from one point of view.
Yeah.
And I think Kurt, I'll ask both Kurt and Ken, one of the big problems I have with the one that you have sitting there, the old town one, was the goal for me, and I think this actually is a goal for Ariana after hearing her speak the other night, which is the master plan is supposed to then help guide your zoning.
Right.
New Paltz has long since, I don't know, I'll go back 15, 20 years ago, the town of New Paltz particularly, and the village, a little more density, but the town, there's no easy developable land. You're in real estate too, There's no such thing as a lot you can just go by and throw a house on any longer. We're now into the spot where it's very difficult land to develop, and some of our zoning doesn't quite match up with that. So I don't know how you get in, because the master plan is your guiding force, so then if you do decline a development, and I'll use Dan's phrase too, and this has been going on in all communities, and ours particularly, we are very reactionary to development in our community instead of where we should be very forthright with it, and then we can have our county legislators out helping us say, hey, look, I got this town, New Paltz, I represent, they're ready for you. So how do we start getting the pieces into that? I think we did a great job as a community. In the old plan, though, was putting little dots on maps. I went to probably a half dozen of those. I think, Ken, you were at a few of those. Remember putting dots on the maps? I don't know, maybe.
I was at one of
You
those
were a
at
couple,
the-
yeah, there's
at
one
the
at
college,
BOCES,
yeah.
we had one at the college, we had one at town hall, and it identified where the people want growth and where they want it. And it was very interesting, and it showed where the growth corridors were out in Ohioville, using South Putt, using North Putt. So I think if we're gonna do questions, I want this to be a piece that the next part of it is, and I always use this, which is, I know I was very disappointed too, there was nothing in that plan that helped lead to any standards of design, or helped us lead us to anything where I could put a moratorium out, for example, on a certain area or a certain type of development, because I had nothing to stand on. Our old master plan does not allow us to do that at all. It doesn't speak to it at all.
It doesn't address it.
It doesn't address it at all. So we need one that somehow can talk back to what is our planning board looking at now, and what do we expect our planning board? And that's a harder question to put out to the community. So I think that's, how do you then question that back to the boards? And I know, Ken, you've written them around, you've read them around the country. Does that make sense? Like, how do we write it also so we're getting the vision of our community? Or how do you question your community? And is that two separate even mailings?
Well, there's a lot to be discussed in terms of developments, where they should be, how they should be, and the impacts of them. One thing that I think is often a shortfall that in California they've always seemed to be cutting edge on is assessing the true economic impacts on communities of different types of developments. And for those categories, for example, there's certain, when they look at certain kinds of residential developments, they recognize that there's no way the property taxes are going to cover the cost impact to the community of having this additional development. And so it's pre-planned through the planning process that works its way into zoning to have impact fees I'm not sure exactly where New York state law is on it and how you empower it. I think it's worth looking into. Where the planning process in itself should look at what are the impact fees of different kinds of developments, and are we going to be covered if we're promoting those kinds of developments. I think also we've had a very important lesson with Wilmerite in terms of if you're promoting industrial development, what is your plan going to be saying about industrial properties that don't pay their fair share of taxes? Under what circumstances would it be okay, and under what circumstances would it not? And should it actually be a strategy as part of your planning process to attempt to get state law or county regulations changed as well? Your municipal master plan doesn't have to stop at your own boundaries. If there are different things that could or should be done to assist local governments, that could be part of the overall strategy that's called for as part of the policies in the plan itself. And so taking a broader vision as to where should the community grow from here. Obviously, you got to look at where are we now, where do we want to go, and how we're going to get there. The how we're going to get there part is very, very substantive in terms of filling in that middle ground of what are the tools that are really necessary, what do we need to be cautious of, what do we need to pre-plan for and make sure we get covered, or to where you want to go may not turn out to be where you really want to go when you realize all the impacts of it. So this is the main value, in my opinion, of doing the strategic planning, so you know what it takes to get where you want to and you're well prepared and understand what those impacts are.
Ken mentioned a couple of things. One was you want your plan to be valuable and implemented. The second one, of course, just now, was looking at things and the impacts. The more and more, and this, Ken was a county planning director and economic development director in New Jersey. New Jersey is sort of at the forefront of a lot of planning, including state planning. I spent 4 years at the Office of Smart Growth, administering smart growth grants, money that required no matching grants. So the idea was that at that point, you would coordinate, in other words, different agencies would review, and if they determined that a community was about to approve a large-scale sprawling development, you were, you're going to be pushed to the back of the line as far as regulatory review, and B, you would not have opportunities for funding and support by everything even down to the Board of Public Utilities in New Jersey. And when I just returned yesterday from the annual New York State Planning Federation conference, and I have some documents I'm going to scan and provide to everyone. But one of the things that they stress, and it's clear now that they're almost following a model of New Jersey and other states that have said, hey, you know, you're more on your own if you're going to do something that's considered not smart growth or very sprawling. So that in order to qualify for some of these now consolidated New York State grants, they're looking for you to explain how it is smart growth that you're entertaining and not something short of that. So what I see is sort of there's a coordination of things that together I think will lead to self-determination. I think is sort of, it's a theme of any plan. I'm not sure it's emphasized enough. I think plans have been done in so many communities, and citizens and elected officials and leaders have been a part of it for so long. Sometimes you forget, and Ken used the word strategic. Well, that certainly came into vogue as well when at the Office of Smart Growth in New Jersey we were reviewing these applications. They were comprehensive, but they were strategic in what they wanted to get done. They weren't encyclopedic. They weren't comprehensive in just and being exhaustive on every subject that there is. And that has been, to some extent, the formula for master plans in New York State and beyond. I think now a modern plan is something more, and strategic is not just a catchphrase. It actually has meaning. Yeah.
And it's dependable in court too.
Yes, you mean the using a plan and it's thinking and its rationale to defend, yes, well, that works wonders.
And because the example I'm just gonna use is, you know, and that's, I believe this is the beauty of the joint plan, is someone comes to our town planning board and proposes and for a lack of a better term, whether it's good or bad, but a sprawling development. There's no way it can't be in sensitive land, that's all we have left. The lands we have left in our community to develop are sensitive lands, whether it be viewscape, wetlands, steep slopes. Would it help us, is there a way to write it too, and to use Ken's term strategically, we could help them develop this, but there could be much better property here in this community, in the village, that same development could take place, and then it would lead to better opportunities for funding, maybe better opportunities for services that would be cheaper.
Well, and also, of course, the one answer from the community that we always get is, what might be your highest priority, and that is preserving what we feel is special about New Paltz, and mostly in terms of the physical environment, but that goes for, well, that includes the cultural environment, includes historic Huguenot Street and other things. That's always been far and away the lead response. So yeah, so that's important. Now, of course, New York State does have transfer development rights, and I won't get into that too much right now because it's really more for discussion, perhaps at a plan workshop. But I will say it hasn't been utilized all that much, and that's because it's awfully complicated. But there is a mechanism that we can discuss with the public and others to allow literally one site to send development rights, and somewhere near the village, perhaps where extension of water and sewer is easy, to receive those. And you can use incentives. In other words, perhaps allowing, it could be anything from additional density to other things, for cooperating with that. But we'll get into that
Okay.
more during the plan.
Yeah, that whole scheme came about by Butch Shavusian from Rutgers University in relation to the Pinelands Comprehensive Management
Yeah.
Act, as I'm sure you're well versed in. The issue that we would have here in doing this, you got two different jurisdictions. You would say, you'd be saying, town of New Paltz, you want to save land, okay. So let's transfer some of those development rights so you can save land so that people can develop in greater density in the village of New Paltz than the zoning would allow. Well, you need two cooperating jurisdictions recognizing that one is benefiting in the same way as the other, although one is getting more development and the other is getting more open space. I think in doing a joint plan, there's that opportunity to recognize that the extra open space that would be preserved in the town is something that is of benefit to people who live in the village as well. It's not two separate islands.
Yeah.
And maybe the plan could, in the way it's developed, could be something that leads toward that. Maybe that could even be part of something you include in your questionnaire explaining that issue,
Yeah.
to see how people feel and provide some justification for it.
Fran? Yeah.
So connected with the survey too, I keep thinking about the meeting that happened a few months ago on the bus station, and transportation, right? And there were a lot of people there, and supposed to put dots on, locations on maps where you thought that there could be a hub, and different questions were raised. But a lot of people who were there were saying, where did this all come from? Why are we talking about this, right? So I think some of the questions in the survey lead you to the why are we talking about this? Because the answers came up, let's say a question was asked about public transportation in New Paltz, and the answer from that survey led Jeff to the conclusion that in the master plan we need to accommodate for it. Then there's an opportunity to feed back to the public. Well, this is why we're doing this in the master plan. So you want the questions to lead you to why you're doing certain things in the plan, and that's oversimplifying it, but really that's the reality.
I want to mention something that's everybody may already know, but perhaps not. there's a piece of work done by Pace University on comprehensive planning. It's not very extensive, but it summarizes what the statutes suggest. You may know that New York State does not have a statute that requires a comprehensive plan to have X number of items in it. But there are suggestions, and there are implications, not legal implications, when you have a comprehensive plan, or if you don't have, because courts will much more likely find against the municipality that does not have a comprehensive plan when there are Article 78s or issues that are raised about zoning, for example. If you don't have a comprehensive plan, courts will not be happy. If you do have, they accept that very, very often as guidance for what you do have in your zoning.
There's a presumption towards its validity. Yeah.
Correct. Secondly, we have a relatively recent instance of planning that was done not in the course of the comprehensive plan, that was the 1994 plan, the B3 district, which involved changes in zoning and which also had implications for the town as well as the village, as development was projected up along 32 North. That plan included something that you were alluding to, design standards. And indeed, it was the only example that I've seen since I'm here where specific design standards were laid out for a particular zone area. That plan sat on the shelf for, as it was mentioned before, for quite a while. Our committee, the committee that I chaired when we were reviewing the plan, our committee members were very taken with that, and we recommended that that be adopted as part of the comprehensive plan going forward. We've adopted it now in advance of the comprehensive
We
plan
have.
going forward,
Although
so,
for what it's worth,
yes.
you were allowed to submit evidence to the court that this is part of our, but it's not in a neat and tidy
It
package.
makes sense, it makes sense within the context of planning
Yes.
Right.
within the village, and I think you could make a good case that it makes sense within the context of planning for the town as well. So we have, I think, a quite interesting, good example that's quite recent, where all of this can play into, I hope, because we haven't yet done it, but I hope very good outcomes for the town and the village that came out of a longer-term planning effort that might have not gone anywhere, might have just sat there as a pretty piece of paper.
That's right. Groups and individuals kept that alive, and of course,
Yeah.
the zoning was adopted last year.
Yes. Now, does everyone have or know how to get a copy of this Pace University?
I do not
Article.
have it, but
Oh,
if you could.
I can easily get it to you.
Yeah,
You just email it to us, yeah, just
I'll-
email
I'll
it to
just
us.
Great,
get
yeah.
a
I think it's
copy.
Pace University Land Use Law Center, maybe
Right.
if you, just for starters, if you type that into a search engine, that might get you there into a lot of other interesting stuff. They have
It's called Comprehensive Planning, Local Leaders Guide to Comprehensive Planning.
Yep.
Local Leaders Guide to Comprehensive Planning. And it is available online. But I'll make a copy
Yeah,
of it.
or no, if you just send us the link.
Yeah, if you
Okay,
send
I'll
us
send
the
you
link,
the
link.
link. Send link.
Send link.
There you go.
That much easier for me.
And it's short, so
Oh, I like that too.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's a virtue.
So I apologize, Kurt, we kind of wandered on you there, but I think we learned a lot, and I'm glad Ken spoke up too, that I think the questions, because in just again, my experience with the one that we did for New Paltz, which is one you have sitting there, not enough time was spent on the questions, and then when we tried to change them, the company didn't agree, and then it kind of fell apart. And So I think this is actually a much bigger piece than you think. 'Cause I do want to do community, and I do want to go look at, and I want to look at that Brunswick stew.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I think it's a really interesting idea. Because I know also the other thing that was not very inclusive, which I was very disappointed with, is we didn't include the planning boards or ZBA boards in that draft. They were almost not included at all. And I think I think that was a major error too, because they're the ones that are talking to the developers, they're the ones that are talking to the landowners, they're the ones that are talking to the ones that are there. So, and I don't know, I noticed when Ariana spoke the other night, and I know it was kind of off topic a little bit, but you were getting into density and where do we want our growth. I mean, it's a big issue, and our master plan does not cover it, and we're going to find ourselves constantly, I don't want to say constantly, but every so often we're going to end up with a battle over this probably is not a correct spot for this development, but yet we don't have anything to back us up on it.
Right.
We really don't.
Yeah,
Now, I just have a question about this process, because one of the things I was thinking of in talking about where we're going as a community, and what I'm going to suggest may not be relevant to our discussion, but I was thinking even just as simple as our committees that we have in village and towns and the duplication of some of them. I'm leaving here to go to our ENCB meeting, and the
Yes.
village has its own as
Yes.
well. Is a part of that also talking about what we want to do with those to potentially even consolidate them? Or in the future
There's no
that kind of stuff?
reason why it couldn't be. There's nothing in the extant plan that says we should do that. But there are calls in each of the reviews that I know of, certainly in Ruth Elwell's group review, and absolutely certainly in the review of the group that I chaired. There were strong recommendations that there be coordination, if not unification of effort between the town and the village committees.
Mhm. I mean, and I was even wondering, and I don't know the legality of this, taking it as far as saying you have a singular planning board with the village as its own
You
district.
can do that. The state municipal law allows entities, even, separate entities like the town and the village, separately incorporated entities, to do legal activities one for the other, as long as it's part of a planned effort. So there has to be then a memorandum of agreement between the two entities that will allow one to do for the other. So you could have a town planning board that acted for the village, as long as it's laid out clearly what activities are being allowed by the one entity to do for the other.
And then we've already, done part of that, a single assessor, so we're
No,
already kind of,
absolutely,
and
yeah.
your plan is something that, I've spoken about before, which is combining your planning boards and keeping two separate ZBAs, because then your zoning board of appeals does have very specific
Yeah.
mandates, and they're quasi judicial. And it would make sense, because that is then the ZBA is when it would make a decision on a dense population area that doesn't really need to understand about how close to a property line does a deer fence need to be, for example, which is what a town ZBA deals with. They deal with more setbacks and like that, where here we want our ZBA dealing with density issues and that. And then you could have one office, one building department, and you can, that's where you start getting a more unified plan between a village and a town, where a village should look like a village and a town
Yeah,
should be
absolutely.
a rural area.
Right,
So I think your
was
idea is very
thinking, going
valid.
back to that the open space conversation
Yeah,
and the
that's what-
density conversation. Man, you and I were talking about the environmental boards already, because where a wetland is, they don't have a village town boundary. So I think that's really, and it just speaks to our volunteer pool.
And Kurt, if we've gotten off topic, which we're going to do, but if we get off topic and it's not something that belongs in a comprehensive plan, please throw something at
Well,
us.
I will, but this does.
Okay,
This
good.
does.
There you go. So please
Very
feel
fair topic.
free to throw something at us to stop us.
As long as we don't presume anything from conversation to what the plan will actually look like.
Exactly.
This is now
No,
we're
it's a
having a
general
conversation
discussion.
about something
Yeah.
that
Right.
could be included
Yes.
in the comprehensive plan, rather than that
Yes.
we've
absolutely.
got this objective.
Yeah, I'd like to just bring up one thing that relates to something Jeff has brought up a couple of times already, the concern about the person that comes in with the large-scale development on an area that has some sensitivity. And I'd just like to offer a comment that if the plan as it comes out covers an area and says, this is an area where residential or this kind of development is generally okay, and then when it actually comes in, you see the details of it, you don't like it, that's where the courts usually rule in favor of the developers, and you don't get what you really want. The comprehensive planning process is really supposed to be where you think through very, very carefully those areas that you want for development and those areas that you don't, and reasonable strategies to preserve those areas that are fair to the landowners, that offer some kinds of alternatives, as we mentioned, with transferring development rights or certain kinds of cluster development, or a proof required on the part of the developer to show that although he's on farmland, his development is going to be on non-prime portion of the farmland, or although it's generally considered wetland or sensitive, his portion of it is going to concentrate on the area that's not. To add those extra burdens in as part of the community objectives in the development of the comprehensive plan. So when that project comes in, you've got a leg to stand on to say this is the way the community envisioned it going forward.
I might suggest, though, that the comprehensive plan itself doesn't have to have all those details. The comprehensive
Standards.
planning can lead to the activities of the village and town to create zoning regulations that would have all of the particular details, which would be consonant with the comprehensive plan, clearly consonant. And I believe that's what courts do look for in New York State when they want to know that the zoning that you've done is done within the within the sense and meaning of the comprehensive plan that you have. The plan
Absolutely.
itself can be fairly short. It doesn't have to have all the details.
Right, but a plan by its very nature is a guide to action.
Yes,
And the more specific those guidelines are that lead to the action the local government wants to take, the stronger the case when you go to court.
And I think, I hope we've learned that this is one of the things that what disappointed me, what we were looking for in the first one, and instead we've ended up in nothing but litigation. So for example, wetlands law, we're still in litigation over that. We're now in our second piece of litigation on that. Floodplain litigation, that was ended and they favored the town. No one has brought that back to court. Steep slopes and streams litigation, that also was closed. So it seems like we're passing laws trying to protect these lands and we're ending up in litigation. So how do we avoid that? And I think Paul, who's past planning board, you want to give your usual introduction to everyone?
well, I've been trying to point
Yeah.
at Paul for a moment now. So that
Paul Brown, past,
Paul Brown,
many 2 years on the planning board, including past chairman.
Tom's point is well taken, and then I understand planning background or Ken and Kurt, of course. I went through that 40-hour course delivered before I joined the planning board on that Pace University.
Yes.
Which was excellent, and they did address, we got a big book, and I read it all. This distinction, I think, is important, that is, we will never craft the paragraphs of the master plan to do what it is needed. We can keep writing words, but we've had a history, I think, of 45 years of doing that. So maybe our planners could think about or comment. I feel that what it's lacked is sample legislation. That is, all the words have been written in the United States. There are no new laws. There are no new land use laws. What I learned was that And people end up fighting over turf they haven't even lost or may never lose, because they're trying to craft a different paragraph. If I read that we're on the verge with this group of really getting down in the least political environment we can, and say, all right, if we believe that steep slopes, here's the sample legislation. And frankly, it's what's done in, I won't quote, in other governments. I don't like them very much, and I don't think they're effective like the federal government. But the lobbyists write the law, and then we know what we're adopting. So I see the opportunity here with this very helpful discussion of understanding, well, and this is the committee's work, but to keep asking the question that Tom raised, what will be in the wording of the master plan? And what will be in our sample legislation? I don't know how that's being done nowadays. It's been a while since I've been through a land use course, but I really feel that then you'll know what you're talking about, and then you'll have the map, and you'll see what you want on cut corners. And if you do put sewers on cut corners, then we know it's going to enable the kind of development we want, and it's not going to turn into the sprawl that Ariana's worried about.
Right.
So I'm very hopeful about the expertise around this table.
I'd like to, this is a happenstance. Last night at this very table was a planning board meeting. And the planning board was considering 4 projects, each of which would be referred or could be referred to the ZBA. The projects were all concerning the area around Montague View, Taylor, and so forth, those streets. If you look at the map, you'll see that Tributary 13 runs from the town, crosses over into the village, crosses back into the town, crosses back into
Right.
the village, and then goes across into the land behind town hall, back in that direction. The builders, the developers, are very aware that they can't do certain things on those lots. They can't build close to the stream that is Tributary 13. There's, by the way, there's a spillway and dam back there also. And there were 2 different kinds of proposals, one of which did not receive a positive recommendation. Remember, all of these are recommendations only from the planning board, because it would appear to infringe on the character of the neighborhood and introduce density where it's not warranted, where the others concerned how close or far from the road could a building be, because it had to be far from the stream. So and by the way, the zoning had been changed for that area, so that when the lots were first laid out, it was conceivable to build, and then when the zoning was changed, it became difficult or impossible without a variance to build. So all of the kinds of issues that we're concerned about now, we have examples of right here in our own little town and village, including the concerns about wetlands
Right.
and our famous Tributary 13.
I mean, yeah, and that's a good example. Tributary 13, as I was a kid, never flooded, it does not do what it does now.
Right.
It's a completely different body of water. But I'm wondering, though, is April 11th not a realistic goal, just from our 45-minute and you have to go to ENCB, right?
Yeah, I got another 10.
Please do. And Dan, I will get you that disc.
I appreciate that.
Maybe
Tom,
tomorrow when you
before
get
you go, let's set another meeting date.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And I'm wondering, with that in mind though, Kurt, I'm wondering do you see that there's a lot more discussion before we get to a community survey piece? Or do you want to try to circulate some? Because Paul brings up a very interesting piece too, which is, a lot of this does need to be driven by legislation too. So I'm wondering, is April
Let's
11th
address
not?
that after we pick a meeting date.
Yeah, but that's what I'm wondering, what do we want to discuss at that meeting date? I think that's the other piece I do want to know. If we're going to set a meeting date, what do we want to discuss at it?
Well, first of all, I will have a draft of survey questions
Okay.
for the plan committee
Okay.
by the time of the next meeting, whenever that is, and I wouldn't mind additional time, but that's something, like I said, that's really something that that I would immediately.
Okay.
So Jeff, for you, I know Wednesdays maybe at this time, and then Thursday and Friday, but not.
Unless we have a
Wednesdays,
town board meeting, and
Right,
then
right.
Fridays are pretty much always open for
Good
me.
Fridays.
Fridays are always open.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do Friday, April 11th.
That would not be good for me, unfortunately.
I'm working that day.
So we won't do that day. That's a good day.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm actually about to become a village resident. Very excited.
But Friday, April 18th would be, if Friday is the day, rather than Wednesday.
The only difficulty is that is Good Friday.
I can't.
The only good day is Friday.
No, that is Good Friday. The 18th is
Oh,
Good
it
Friday.
is Good
Friday. That's that's
Okay.
the start of Easter weekend.
Not in Greece.
No.
I'm sorry, my head is still there. At any rate, what about Wednesday the 16th?
Yeah.
Kurt is on.
It's okay with me.
No?
I'm good.
Good
Yeah.
with that? All right.
I'm not good that week,
Could be.
basically.
Not that week?
Yeah, the 14th
See
to
how
the
it is.
18th I've got.
Is the 9th too soon to convene?
I think for Kurt to.
Oh, Kurt.
And for Kurt to do anything for us to get
Yeah.
much time.
Okay.
What about the 10th?
I'm free the 10th.
I could do the
It's
10th.
okay, that what I would do is I would probably submit these, for our conversation that night, it might only be 24 to 48 hours in advance. I mean, that's the only caveat
I don't
that,
have an issue with it.
No, that would be.
Okay.
I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Thursday, April 10th.
Okay.
Awesome.
What time?
I mean, this time seems to work.
Kurt,
As
do you
long
have,
as
do you have a,
there's a-
do you have a time that in mind for you, or does anyone on the board? I'm good any time on that day.
I'm available on that day at any time that this committee wants to meet.
I'll be traveling from Kingston, so 5.
I just prefer to try to hold the general, trying
All right,
to
I'm going to
public can
say
attend. I'm a big fan.
Thursday, April 10th at 5:30.
Sounds great.
But we need to
Take a look.
know that space is available, and it's extremely difficult for us to determine that at this
Well,
moment.
I have the town calendar on my phone.
Would you let us know if
And,
there's a
There are
space?
no other meetings at that time, at
Then-
least no publicly noticed meetings, I should say.
Every Thursday is Climate Action Coalition here.
That's
I
right.
think they use the small room or this room.
But that's the only thing that's
They
scheduled.
use the small one.
That's correct.
Yeah, they
It
use
does say
the.
small meeting room, yes.
Well, let's try, I mean, given that we met here first, let's meet at the town hall next.
Sounds good.
Okay, that
Will
makes
you contact whoever?
Yeah, I'll talk, yep, I'll shoot out the email tomorrow. No problem.
So, all right, so we're meeting April 10th, 5:30, Town Hall.
I want to make sure.
Oh, can you, is there, good man.
Okay.
All
I
right.
got it around, guys.
All right.
Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Right.
Dan, I will talk to you tomorrow.
If you have any issues, I guess just let us know if you can't make it.
All right, we've accomplished 2 of our objectives,
Yes, we
and
have.
we only had 2 objectives. So this is a good first meeting.
It
And we
is.
covered some very interesting territory. I am going to deliver to you the PACE article
Thank you.
by linking to it, and
Fran, Ken, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
and I will also send copies of the 19 objectives that came out of the committee that I chaired, even though they are available on Google Groups. There might be some difficulty accessing that site at this time.
If you send that to me, that would be a big.
I will do that.
And also, again, Tom, the way you had sent it to me, even though I couldn't use the link, I was able to open those 2
Oh,
documents.
you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Why don't you send it then?
Sure. Yeah.
Kurt will send
Can you send that, Kurt?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Google Groups, and it's Master Plan Task Force at googlegroups.com. All right, so, but I will still get you the Pace University short article. Can we adjourn?
I believe that we can.
Okay, that's it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
meeting is adjourned at 7:45 and 10 seconds.
6:40.
Thank you.
6:40.
6:45, my mistake, thank you very much.
And Paul, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well.
It's unheard of to
Oh,
be
that's,
after meetings
yes.
that early.
Yes.
You know, I ran literally